My husband, Daniel Thompson, wasn't a perfect man, but to me, he was the world. From the very first day we met at a small cafe in Minnesota, his crooked smile and warm, steady voice carved themselves into my memory, impossible to erase. For more than 20 years, we lived in a peaceful marriage. He was gentle, calm, always ready to listen, and sometimes a little secretive about his past. But there was one strange thing I could never forget. Daniel often mentioned a place, then immediately told me never to go there. A farm in Saskatchewan, Canada. His childhood home. Every time I teased him, asking, "What's there that you don't want me to see?" his face would tense for just a moment. His voice would drop, and he'd say only, "Never go to that farm, Emily. Promise me." I promised. Not because I wasn't curious, but because I respected the shadows he wasn't ready to reveal. That promise stayed in my mind like a sealed box, quietly tapping at the edges of my thoughts whenever Daniel rarely spoke about his childhood in Canada. Then, one cold autumn morning, everything fell apart. Daniel was gone, suddenly, from a heart attack. No warning, no goodbye. I remember that morning so clearly. It began like any other until the hospital called. I was 52, newly widowed, clutching at the fragments of our life together, my heart filled with a vast emptiness. Our daughter, Sophia, just in her early 20s, was lost in anger and grief. 2 weeks later, after the funeral flowers had wilted, I sat in Daniel's lawyer's office, Mr. Hargrove, surrounded by the smell of old paper and the cold scratching of his fountain pen signing documents that made death feel like a transaction. I just wanted to finish and go home, but then he slid a small box across the table. Inside, nestled in black velvet, was an old brass key with an oak leaf charm. Beside it lay a sealed envelope, my name written in Daniel's familiar handwriting. Mr. Hargrove spoke slowly. "Daniel purchased a property in Saskatchewan, Canada, 3 years ago. According to his instructions, you were only to be informed after his passing. The property is now in your name. Taxes are prepaid for 5 years." I froze. Daniel had never owned any property besides our home. Why would he buy a farm? How did he afford it? And why keep it a secret from me? Mr. Hargrove went on. "You'll see on the documents the property's name is Willow Brook Farm. It's where Daniel grew up, though it changed hands several times before he bought it back. There's something else. The land has recently become quite valuable because an oil field was discovered nearby." I stared at the key. Its cold weight pressed into my palm, as if carrying a message from another world. Daniel had never spoken of investments, let alone oil. A part of his life I had never touched was now emerging from beneath layers of secrecy. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. "My dearest Emily."
My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, it means I've gone too soon. I'm sorry for many things, but not for this. The farm is yours. I've turned it into something beautiful for you, something I hope will bring you peace. You are free from the promise you once made. Go there, at least once. The laptop on my desk, its password is the day we met, plus your maiden name. Love you forever. Dan. Tears blurred my vision. For a moment, I could almost see Daniel standing before me, smiling softly, urging me to open the door he'd kept locked for so long. But along with the love came unease. Why did everything have to be hidden this way? Mr. Hargrove placed another folder on the desk. "There's one more thing you should know. Daniel's family in Canada is contesting the will. They claim he wasn't of sound mind when he bought the property. The discovery of oil has complicated matters, and no one else knows about this letter. A chill swept through the room. Even though the afternoon sun was warm outside, real estate, oil, family disputes, they all began to weave together into a web of potential danger. And I, newly widowed, still reeling from loss, was holding the key to either a treasure or a storm. I left the office with the box in my hand. The key felt heavier than a stone suitcase. In my mind, Daniel's words echoed again, "Never go to that farm." But this time, another phrase followed. "It's time." That night, I sat alone in the living room, candlelight flickering against our family photos, the key gleaming on the table before me. I turned it slowly between my fingers, tracing the cold ridges of metal, trying to imagine the door it would open. Part of me wanted to stop here, to live out the rest of my life with warm memories and quiet days, untouched by secrets, oil, or inheritance disputes. But another part of me, a stronger one, needed to know the truth. When the clock struck 2 in the morning, I had made my decision. At sunrise, I would book a flight to Saskatchewan. I didn't know what awaited me at Willow Brook Farm, but I knew that this key and that letter were just the beginning of a journey to understand Daniel, to uncover what he hid from me, and to finally answer the question that had haunted me since the day he died. Why me? And why this secret? The plane landed at Regina Airport in the faint chill of early morning. A thin strand of white cloud stretched across the pale sky, softening the light of the rising sun. Pulling my heavy coat tighter, I stepped outside with a mix of anticipation and unease, as if I were walking into the first chapter of a story that had only just begun to reveal itself. The road from the city to the Saskatchewan countryside seemed endless, miles of golden rolling fields framed by oak trees tinged with autumn's rest. I rented an SUV and drove myself, wanting the freedom to stop whenever I pleased. With each passing mile, my thoughts circled back to Daniel, the cryptic way he spoke about his hometown, the shadow that crossed his eyes whenever anyone mentioned the farm. After nearly 3 hours of driving, I saw it, the wrought iron gate, with the name Willow Brook Farm curling across it like willow branches in the wind. I pressed the brake hard. My heart began to pound as if someone had just whispered my name. The brass key in my coat pocket felt icy cold. I slid it into the lock and turned it gently. The metallic click rang out sharply in the still country air. The gate creaked open, revealing a gravel path winding through gentle hills toward a large cream-colored house, its red roof gleaming under the sun. I had braced myself for decay, for a forgotten ruin, but what stood before me looked like a restored European estate, elegant and perfectly cared for. The deeper I drove, the more I noticed the deliberate beauty of it all. Neatly trimmed hedges, lush green lawns, rows of lavender blooming a deep, regal purple. But what stopped me in my tracks was inside the house itself. I froze in the doorway of the living room. Along the walls hung large paintings of galloping horses, magnificent and alive. Bronze sculptures of stallions stood proudly beside framed photographs of rare breeds from around the world. Turning slowly, I felt as if I'd stepped into a gallery devoted entirely to my lifelong passion. Daniel knew I had loved horses since girlhood, though he never seemed to grasp the depth of that love. But here, this entire room proved he not only understood, but built a sanctuary around it. By the window stood a sleek silver laptop. Resting atop it was a single red rose, its petals still fresh, as though just plucked. Before I could open the laptop, the hum of an engine broke the silence. Through the glass, I saw a black SUV pulling up to the porch. 3 men stepped out, tall, dark-haired, with the same sharp jawlines and cold features that faintly echoed Daniel's. They approached the front door without a hint of a smile. I locked it on instinct. Then came the knocking, measured, firm, and a deep voice that carried both authority and familiarity. "Mrs. Thompson, we know you're inside. We should talk." My stomach tightened. "I'm Michael, Daniel's brother. This is James, and that's Thomas. We're here about the farm." I didn't answer. My feet carried me toward the table, toward the silent laptop. Daniel's note replayed in my mind. 05198 Harris. My fingers typed it in. The screen flickered to life, revealing a folder titled, "For Emily."
Inside were hundreds of video files, dated consecutively through the year before his death. I clicked the first one. Daniel appeared on the screen, sitting in this very room. He smiled faintly, his eyes deep and tired. "Hey, Emily. If you're watching this, it means I'm not there to stop you. I knew you wouldn't be able to resist, Emily." His voice trembled slightly, but his humor lingered. He explained that 3 years ago, doctors had diagnosed him with a hereditary heart condition, one that gave him only 2 to 5 years to live. He had kept it from me and Sophia, not wanting our remaining time together to drown in fear and pity. I blinked hard, emotions swirling, pain, anger, disbelief. He had taken away my chance to prepare, to say goodbye properly, just to preserve a few final years of normalcy? Daniel seemed to read my thoughts through the screen. "I know you'll be angry, but I did it out of love. Instead of letting the illness take everything, I used the time I had left to build something I knew you'd always dreamed of. You love horses, wide open spaces, the wind on the grass. So I bought back my childhood farm, using the savings I'd hidden, and remade it into the place you always imagined. I kept it secret from my brothers. They think they have a claim to it." He spoke of how the farm had once been derelict and abandoned. He'd restored it in secret, under the guise of business trips. When we talked on the phone, he'd cover the sound of drills and saws with polite stories about meetings. Then his tone darkened. "My brothers know about the oil deposit nearby. They'll come for it. Persuade you, threaten you, whatever it takes. Don't let them." Outside, the knocking grew louder, but I didn't move. My eyes stayed fixed on the screen. "RCMP, open the door." I drew in a deep breath and opened it. A young sergeant stood flanked by the 3 men. Michael spoke quickly. "We have a warrant to inspect the property." I handed over the blue folder. "Then you should look at this first. Daniel expected this." The sergeant flipped through the documents, scanning each page carefully. After a few minutes, he looked up. "Everything appears legitimate. There's no basis for an inspection." Michael's face flushed red. "You have no right to keep this place." I met his glare squarely. "I have every right. This land is mine, legally and by Daniel's wish. You may share his DNA, but you don't share his love or his legacy." They stormed off, but I knew the storm itself was far from over. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room surrounded by paintings of horses, watching the rows on the laptop wilt, replaying Daniel's words over and over. I realized then I hadn't come here to receive a gift. I had stepped into a battle Daniel had foreseen, one that he had prepared me for at every turn. From the doorway, I watched their car disappear down the road, swallowed by the stillness of the prairie. The wind carried the scent of dry grass and faint wood from the distant stables. Somehow, I knew this was no longer about inheritance or memory. It was about finishing what Daniel had started. I turned back inside and reopened the laptop. The next video began. Daniel stood outside by the stables, his hand gently stroking a sleek black horse beneath the golden evening light. He said, "Her name's Midnight. I found her because of that painting you loved years ago. I wanted you to see her and know I never stopped paying attention to the small things about you." His voice was low, intimate, as if he were whispering just behind my shoulder. I glanced out the window and saw Midnight grazing peacefully. My heart tightened and softened all at once. The next morning, I decided to visit the stables. The dirt path was strewn with fallen gold leaves that crunched faintly beneath my boots. The wooden barn had been freshly painted, and inside stood 6 magnificent horses, a snow-white Andalusian, a jet-black Frisian, a golden Akhal-Teki, and 3 other rare breeds I'd only ever seen in books. As I admired them, a middle-aged man appeared in the doorway, wearing a thick coat and a felt hat. "Mrs. Thompson? I'm Henry Ellis. Daniel hired me to care for them." His voice was calm, his gaze sincere. "He talked about you often, how much you'd given to your family and how the rest of your life should belong to what you love." Henley explained that Daniel had worked tirelessly during his final 6 months to complete everything before his health gave out. He'd hired the best craftsmen, bought every horse from the dream list I'd once mentioned in passing. But when I asked about Daniel's family, his expression darkened. "They're not like him. His brothers mocked him when he bought this place, thought the land was worthless, until the oil was discovered." He paused. "They'll be back, Mrs. Thompson. You can count on it." The morning chill seemed to seep into my bones as he said it. I knew he was right, and that meant one thing. Every clue I needed was hidden somewhere in those videos Daniel left behind.
That afternoon, the sun slanted low across the golden oak trees outside. I had just finished watching one of Daniel's old videos on the laptop when the sound of engines echoed from a distance, heavy, deliberate, like thunder rolling before a storm. Through the window, I recognized the same black SUV that had appeared the day before. This time, a shiny silver sedan followed close behind. When the sedan door opened, my heart froze. Sophia, my daughter, stepped out, her hair falling to her shoulders, wearing a cream-colored knit coat. What broke me wasn't her presence. It was her smile as she shook hands with Michael and James, perfectly at ease, like reuniting with old friends. Daniel had warned me they might try to manipulate Sophia. Now his warning had become reality. The 3 men and Sophia walked straight into the house. No knocking, no permission. Their attitude made it clear they believed Willow Brook Farm belonged to them. Michael moved directly to the fireplace, turned toward me, and spoke in a tone that pretended to be conciliatory. "We got off on the wrong foot, Mrs. Thompson. My brothers and I understand this is a family matter, and family should share what's valuable. We'd like to make a fair offer. Split everything 3 ways. You, Sophia, and us." Sophia turned to me, her eyes pleading but strangely persuasive. "Mom, it makes sense. If we sell the farm, everyone gets a few $1,000,000. You could live comfortably, never have to worry again." I took a deep breath to steady myself, then said slowly and clearly, "This farm is your father's legacy to me, not anyone else. No one has the right to divide it." James, the sharpest and coldest of the 3, cut in immediately. "Daniel wasn't in his right mind when he bought this place. We have evidence and can prove it in court. If you cooperate, things will go much easier." I met his gaze without flinching. "Daniel was perfectly sane. You just want the oil fields nearby. Don't pretend this is about family." At that moment, Henry appeared in the doorway, his expression cautious but firm. He stepped inside and stood beside me, a silent reminder that I wasn't alone. The air grew thick, heavy, like an unspoken courtroom. I demanded that the men leave so I could speak privately with Sophia. Michael shrugged, arrogance flickering in his eyes. Sophia hesitated, then turned to leave with them, pausing only long enough to say, "I'll think about it, Mom, but chances like this don't come twice." The door shut, leaving a cold emptiness behind. The sunlight outside still burned golden, but inside the room, only darkness spread. Daniel had been right. They didn't care about family or legacy. All they cared about was what lay beneath the soil. That night, I barely slept. The wind howled through the oaks outside, mingling with the distant sound of horses' hooves. Haunting, rhythmic. In my mind, the image of Sophia walking away with Michael replayed again and again, like a cruel film loop. The pain of betrayal cut deep, but underneath it was anger, and the faint understanding that she had been deceived, just as Daniel had once warned. I turned the laptop back on and found the last set of videos Daniel had recorded. His face appeared, thinner than before, but still wearing that gentle smile. "Emily, if they ever turn Sophia against you, don't blame her. They'll paint easy dreams, make you look selfish for holding on. You need to show her the truth." I glanced at the folder labeled Evidence. Inside were rows of files, land purchase records, geological surveys, oil exploration reports, and one financial investigation report that made my heart pound. It proved beyond doubt that Michael, James, and Thomas had embezzled family funds, evaded taxes, and profited illegally under the guise of joint ownership. If this ever went public, their reputations would be destroyed. The next morning, I met Sophia at a cafe in town. She arrived cautious, eyes searching mine. "They said you and Dad hid the oil field from me. I just want to know the truth." I handed her a special video, one Daniel had recorded for her alone. His voice was calm, but firm. "I hid my illness because I loved you. The men you call uncles once hurt our family. Protect your mother and yourself. Don't let them use you." When the video ended, Sophia sat silent, eyes glistening. I didn't know. They told me something completely different." I reached for her hand. "That's why your father left everything to me. If we stand together, they can't take anything from us." She nodded, her expression steadier now, but I knew this battle wasn't over. They'd be back, with new tricks. 3 days later, they returned, but not alone. A well-dressed man with a confident smile stepped out of a luxury car. Michael introduced him proudly. "This is Mr. Carter, CEO of Northern Extraction. If you agree to cooperate, his company will buy the farm for a very generous price. You and Sophia will be set for life." Sophia glanced at me, conflicted. She still hadn't fully escaped their influence. I took a slow breath, keeping my voice calm. "You're trying to buy something Daniel worked hard to protect, but before Mr. Carter makes any decisions, there's information he should see."
I led them into the small conference room on the west side of the house. On the table lay the real geological survey Daniel had left, not the altered version they'd shown Sophia. "The largest oil reserve lies beneath the western section you claimed was worthless and left out of your proposal," I explained. "Daniel hired independent experts to confirm it. If Northern Extraction ignores that section, you'll be throwing away millions." Carter's expression tightened as he studied the map. Beside me, Sophia began to understand. I continued, pushing a stack of financial reports toward the three brothers. "And here's proof you embezzled and committed tax fraud. If I release this, your reputations are gone." Silence fell. No one spoke. Finally, Carter stood, gathering his papers. "Northern Extraction doesn't do business with those who conceal information. We're withdrawing our offer." Michael's face turned pale. The fight had drained out of them. After a few whispered exchanges, James finally asked quietly, "What are your terms?" "Leave my life and Sophia's forever," I said evenly. "No lawsuits, no manipulation, no coming back. Do that, and everything I know stays locked away."
They looked at one another and nodded. After signing the agreement, the three brothers left Willow Brook Farm in silence. No handshake, no goodbye. I stood on the porch, watching their cars disappear down the gravel road, feeling as if a boulder had been lifted from my chest. But deep down, I knew men like them rarely keep their promises. Sophia came to stand beside me, her eyes full of regret. "Mom, I'm sorry. I let them use me. I thought I was helping, but I was betraying you and Dad." I pulled her close, whispering, "What matters is that we're together now. Your father prepared for everything. We just have to honor his plan." For a while, peace returned, but only for a few months. One spring afternoon, Sophia called me, her voice tense. "Mom, Uncle Robert came to see me. He said Michael is critically ill. He needs a heart transplant, and I might be a match." A cold shiver ran through me. After everything they'd done, now they wanted to take life from my daughter? I told Robert to come to the farm the next day. When they arrived, I placed an envelope on the table. One Daniel had written for this very scenario. In his familiar handwriting, Daniel had written, "Emily, if they ever return claiming illness, remember, my mother left my father because he was violent and had another family. I'm not his only son. In Saskatoon, there are 2 half-brothers with matching medical profiles. If they truly need help, send them there." Robert's face went pale as he finished reading. No one said a word. They left in silence, carrying shame and defeat. As the gate of Willow Brook Farm closed behind them, I felt, for the first time, that the circle of conflict had finally ended. No more shadows would ever come between me, Sophia, and Daniel's legacy. The confrontation with my husband's family seemed finally behind us, but deep down I knew Daniel had left something more, something he hadn't yet revealed. After fully taking my side, Sophia began to grow curious too, not about her father's illness, but about his secret work here on the farm during his final days. One morning, Henry came to see us, his face grave. "Daniel told me that if you and Sophia ever stood together, I was to show you something no one else knows about but him and me." He led us to an old barn on the western edge of the property. The dark wooden door creaked open as he pushed it open, revealing a dusty interior shrouded in shadow. Henry pulled aside a pile of hay in the corner, exposing a heavy iron trap door. The key trembled lightly in my hand as I turned it. Then a sharp click echoed through the barn, as if unlocking a buried secret. Beneath it, a staircase descended into the earth. Cool, damp air rose up from below. We walked down carefully, the dim yellow lights flickering on one by one, revealing a large concrete chamber, more like a bunker than a cellar. Lining the walls were rows of metal cabinets, a sturdy work table, and several large maps pinned to the far side. I recognized immediately these weren't decorative maps. They were detailed geological surveys, pinpointing underground oil reserves. The problem was, most of the oil lay beneath the very section of land labeled worthless in the official documents the brothers had once shown us. Henry explained quietly. Daniel hired an independent geology team, one not tied to any major company. The real survey results were kept down here so his brothers wouldn't find them. If this got out, they'd do whatever it took to seize this land. Sophia stepped closer, her hand brushing over the map, her face a mix of awe and disbelief. Dad played a brilliant game. All that useless land they ignored? It's the real treasure. I opened a drawer labeled Important Documents. Inside were complete legal files and detailed records proving Michael, James, and Thomas's fraudulent dealings. Everything was organized, ready to use if needed, like a strategic arsenal Daniel had left behind for us. Sophia sat down, her eyes still fixed on the map, her voice soft as if speaking to herself. "Now I understand why he kept this secret. If I'd known earlier, I might not have been able to keep it either." I folded the map carefully and looked to Henry. "We need to make sure the brothers don't know this bunker exists."
Henry nodded. "I locked it up the day Daniel died. No one else has a key. But don't think they'll stop trying.
Once word about the oil leaks, they'll come back, legally or otherwise, to claim it. Sophia gripped my hand tightly. Mom, we have to get ahead of them. If we sign with a reputable, sustainable oil company, they'll have no room to interfere. I remembered Daniel's words from one of his old videos. Oil is a double-edged sword. It can bring you stability or destroy everything. Choose someone who values more than profit. Together, Henry, Sophia, and I cataloged every document, made digital backups, and stored a secure copy in the bank. When we finished, I felt as though I'd taken another step down the path Daniel had drawn for us. But the calm lasted only 3 weeks. On a Monday morning, the roar of engines echoed at the gate. I stepped outside to see Michael, James, and Thomas once again, this time dressed sharply, accompanied by a stranger, a powerful-looking man who introduced himself as the CEO of Western Plains Petroleum. Michael spoke first, curt and businesslike. We know you've discovered the Western section. We're here to propose a new partnership, profit sharing. Sophia, standing beside me, couldn't hide her disdain. This isn't your land to share. I turned to the CEO. If you're serious about partnering, then you deserve the truth based on independent data, not falsified numbers. I nodded to Henry, who laid the real geological map on the table in the living room. All eyes immediately locked on the red markings showing the main oil reserves, entirely within the western fields, the same area their records had labeled worthless. Michael frowned. Where did you get this? I from Daniel. The independent geologist confirmed it. You intentionally omitted that section to set up a future takeover. The CEO studied the map closely, his expression hardening by the second. If this is authentic data, my company will not do business with anyone who conceals information or operates under disputed ownership. Sophia stepped forward holding the financial fraud records Daniel had compiled. And for the record, these men have a history of embezzlement and tax evasion. If you need another reason to walk away from them, here it is. I slid the folder toward the CEO, then fixed my gaze on Michael. It's over. You'll sign an agreement to leave this property alone. No lawsuits, no interference. If you do, everything I have stays locked away forever. The air grew heavy. Michael glanced at James and Thomas. Resentment flickered between them, but none spoke. Finally, James nodded stiffly. Fine, but this will be the last time we ever meet. I signed the agreement and pushed the papers toward them. Sophia signed beside me. The sound of the pen scratching across the page felt like closing a long, bitter chapter and opening a new one. They left Willow Brook Farm in silence, engines fading into the golden distance of the fields. The quiet that followed felt almost unnatural. Sophia stood next to me on the porch, exhaustion and relief mingling in her voice. Mom, we finally protected everything. Dad would be so proud. I smiled softly, but deep inside, I knew Daniel's dream wasn't just for us to keep his legacy. It was for us to build upon it. Later, when I returned to the bunker to store the documents, I noticed a small wooden box tucked inside the far right cabinet. On top of it lay a handwritten note from Daniel. Emily, this is the final part of the plan. Not for defense, but for moving forward. Inside was a preliminary contract already signed by Daniel and an international oil company specializing in sustainable extraction. Attached was a letter from Daniel to the board, naming me as the rightful owner and successor. The agreement only needed my signature to take effect. Sophia picked up the letter, her eyes brightening. Dad chose exactly the kind of partner he talked about. No greed, no destruction, just the clean, long-term project. Together, we signed the contract. It felt like turning the page to a new chapter. Willow Brook Farm was no longer a place haunted by old secrets. It had become the foundation of a new life, a future Daniel had envisioned and prepared for, step by step. As the sun set, Sophia and I walked out to the western fields, the true heart of the farm. The wind carried the scent of dry grass and the distant sound of hooves from the stables. I looked up at the sky glowing orange and gold, clutching the old brass key in my hand. "We did it, Dan," I whispered. "Every secret is in the light now." That summer at Willow Brook Farm passed in a peace I hadn't felt in years. Every morning I woke to sunlight spilling through the windows, the soft neighing of horses from the stable, and the rustle of oak leaves swaying in the wind. On my desk, Daniel's laptop still rested in its usual place, but there were no new videos. Every message had already been delivered, as if each file had been a puzzle piece, and now I had finally completed the picture he left behind. Sophia and I spent our days exploring every corner of the farm. The grand library where Daniel had stocked the very books I loved but had forgotten amid years of family duties. The art studio, with a new wooden easel that still carried the scent of fresh pine. The horse stable, home to 6 rare breeds that had now become my evening companions. Every detail whispered of Daniel's devotion, not just his love, but his understanding, his preparation, and his quiet sacrifice. The Sustainable Oil Project had officially begun. The team of engineers and geologists worked methodically, ensuring that neither the environment nor the landscape was harmed. Willow Brook kept its natural beauty, the vast meadows, the oak woods, while the oil revenue provided a steady foundation for our future. Sophia had changed so much. She took part in the management side, studied finance and environmental policy, and stayed close to Henry and the stable workers. Whenever she spoke of her father now, her eyes no longer filled with pain, but with pride. As for me, I began painting again, something I had abandoned for decades. Inside the studio, I restored my old canvases and created new ones. The western field at sunrise, horses galloping through the mist, and a portrait of Sophia smiling under the amber glow of dusk. I knew these paintings were my way of answering Daniel's final gift, a life where I could simply be myself, unburdened by grief or duty, already fulfilled. Autumn arrived once more. Golden oak leaves blanketed the gravel path leading to the farmhouse. I stood on the porch, watching them drift in the wind. The whole world seemed to breathe with me, light, calm, and free. The threats from Daniel's family had faded into the past. No more sudden knocks at the door, no more watchful eyes or disguised proposals. In their place, Willow Brook had become a true home, for me, for Sophia, for Henry, and for everyone who worked this land with their hearts. One evening, Sophia and I sat by the fireplace, the flames painting warm shadows across the walls filled with horse portraits. She turned to me, her voice thoughtful. "Mom, I never thought I'd find strength in loss, but Dad gave us that, in a way no one could have imagined." I smiled. "Loss is just a door, sweetheart. Beyond it lies a choice, to move forward or to stop. And we chose to move forward." The day we signed the final contract with the Sustainable Oil Company, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, but continuation. Daniel had begun this story, and now we were writing its next chapters, ones unshaded by fear or deceit. That night, I walked to the stable and stood beside Midnight. Moonlight shimmered across his sleek black coat. I whispered, "We did it, Dan. The dream you built in your final days, it's real now." Willow Brook Farm was no longer just land, a house, or an inheritance. It had become proof that love can outlast death, that an old promise can open the door to a brand new future. When I closed the bunker door for the last time, I knew every secret had been revealed. All that remained was life itself, where the past, present, and future blended into one vast canvas. And I, Emily Thompson, would keep painting it, with every color Daniel left behind. Sometimes love doesn't end when life does. It lingers in every sunrise, every breath of wind, every choice we make to keep moving forward. Here at Willow Brook Farm, Daniel's story became our beginning. And maybe, in your own way, you'll find that love can build something that never truly fades. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe and join us for more family stories that remind us what really lasts.